Welcome, everyone, to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. My name is Ben Smith. I'm joined by my colleague, Curtis Wister, the Mark Zuckerberg to my Jack Dorsey. How you doing today, Curtis?
I'm doing well, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's kind of end of summer into fall right now, and
It is.
in Maine, it's like really starting to happen. You're starting to see a little change of leaves, and kind of things are starting to go there. But obviously, as we're kind of thinking about changing in seasons and kind of things that might be happening to us, one of the things we've been talking about a little bit on the side, maybe even from a client perspective, is kind of security and cybersecurity. So
Yeah.
we are at episode number 50.
5-0.
50. This is a pretty big episode for us. So we really wanted to go and try to find someone. Actually, we've been searching for a while, someone that has a high level of expertise in cybersecurity. So the premise of today's show is how to keep ourselves safe online as we age.
hmm
And what we're finding is cyber criminals and fraudsters, they're really always attempting to go after the most vulnerable targets. And really not enough is being done to protect and educate the elderly who are among those who are most regularly targeted by online scams. So while we discuss a lot of things, especially stay at home right now during the pandemic, about protecting the workforce online, but we have a lot of population as we age that are becoming more web using, tech savvy, and they're using the internet really without any in-house security team to help them navigate the dangers posted by scammers.
Sure.
And as we know, and we've had this happen where our clients have come to us with an email or something that looks legitimate, but criminals have always targeted the elderly and away from the protections of an organization with firewalls, especially,
Mm.
but antivirus protection and other security measures. So older users, especially those identified as wealthy, are viewed as an easy target for cyber attackers,
Yeah.
whether it be phishing emails, fake invoices, phony tech support calls. Scammers are always attempting schemes against people who, in some cases, are really the most vulnerable targets.
Mm.
But as population grows older, more and more services switch to becoming more predominantly digital and online. So the issue of cyber attacks targeting the elderly is only becoming a bigger and bigger, more damaging issue if something really doesn't change first. And that's really why we want to have this conversation today, because we're starting to see this wave starting to really hit people. So that's really the premise of our show today.
Mm.
So again, we did a really kind of a big search here looking for somebody with cybersecurity expertise. So our next guest graduated from Harvard University and studied advanced computer security at Stanford. He's the founder and CEO of Achilleion, a cybersecurity startup based in Los Angeles. He's a software developer, cybersecurity and compliance expert, and a serial entrepreneur. He serves as a technical advisor to several companies in the healthcare, consumer technology, real estate, and financial sectors. He served as the CEO of Rizm and Equametrics, which developed revolutionary algorithmic trading technology. Rizm raised $5.1 million when it was acquired in 2015. He also has extensive experience building web-based and mobile applications in multiple languages and frameworks. So at this time, I'd love to welcome Amir Tarighat to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. So welcome, Amir. Appreciate you having on.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So as well with the Retirement Success in Maine podcast, we want to get to know you a little bit, Amir, in terms of who you are, what you're about, your work life, all that. So love to just get a little bit of your background and biography, including your path towards working in the cybersecurity space. So tell us the beginnings there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my first company was in the financial technology space, and pretty much every job I've had or company I've started has been in regulated industries. So like healthcare, finance, touching on areas that compliance and security are a critical component of what you're building. And I've always had an interest in that. I did decide to kind of formalize my knowledge and experience by doing the program at Stanford, which was a really great program. And it's a problem and field that I've always been interested in and passionate about, solving, especially on the personal side. A lot of the industry is focused on enterprise security and corporate security, a much smaller portion of it is focused on helping individuals.
Gotcha. So can you tell me a little bit about, like, how did you kind of develop this love for working in the computer security space, right? Because I can imagine it's something where it's not probably from day one you start out going, hey, when I grow up, I want to be in the computer security space. So how did it kind of that evolve for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of what every developer has to do, especially when you're kind of in those regulated industries. So I was always exposed to it, and the thing that you love about it, or the thing that I love about it, is not the necessarily like the compliance work. It's the dedication and passion you have for helping people and for dealing with issues when they happen. So it really comes from the calling of doing that sort of stuff.
Awesome. So I want to hear a little bit about this, because I think this will give us a little bit of framework as well. Can you talk about how your space has really changed over the past 10 years, right? Because I can imagine what you were doing 10 years ago to what you're doing today. It's got to be worlds of difference. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it's changed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cybersecurity has changed a lot. There's been, kind of incremental progressive changes that aren't kind of like ground shattering, but like, a big change that happened around 10 years ago was the shift to like cloud computing services. So people went from, and that's still happening. It's still happening today. So, the way that security is done for cloud-based applications, and if you're, someone else is really owning the server that your applications and servers are running on, it's different. So, that changed a lot. That's probably the biggest shift. But kind of the area that I've been focused on, and actually probably the biggest shift in computer security in the past 30 years, just started happening in the last 2 to 3 years. And that's that, hackers have en masse shifted their focus from attacking traditional targets that we think of as like companies and their systems, to targeting individuals. And even the really large attacks start with attacks on individuals and move into the company. So the example I give for that is the Colonial Pipeline attack, which was just a couple of months ago, about a month after Bloomberg reported that the way that attack occurred was that an individual employee was compromised in their personal life, had nothing to do with company, systems, computers, anything. A password was stolen, and the password that employee used for whatever site, we don't know what site it was for, happened to be the same password he used to log into his company network. And the attackers were able to log in. Now, what's interesting about this is that, these attacks, they're we like to think of them as like commodity attacks on data. So the people that attacked that person probably didn't even know, what his net worth was, or, what company he worked for. It was all just, oh, this person, this is what we can do with this. This person works here. Let's see if his password for this is the same as his work password. And that's kind of like how it works from attacking individuals, which are really easy and profitable for attackers. They're, attackers are operating a business, and then moving into companies.
Well, that's scary from the first part. So maybe can you talk a little bit about then your organization, Achilleion? Can you talk about what you guys do and how you help folks with cybersecurity?
Yeah, so Achilleion is the most comprehensive cybersecurity for individuals. What we do is we provide security for people, and we sell that directly to consumers. It starts at $20 a month. And we also sell that to companies. Leading companies buy it for their employees. They in the scenario of Colonial Pipeline, it would have prevented that attack. So what we do is it combines three things. It's software that goes on all your devices, smartphones, computers, tablets. Monitoring. I like to explain it as ADT for cybersecurity. So when something happens, we're the first responders that get involved. And then the third part is risk management. So there's insurance-like coverages that cover you for lost funds, repair, replacement, remediation, ransoms, that sort of thing.
So kind of another way to kind of put that is, and I know, Amir, you and I talked about this, was, hey, if you're in an organization, you're provided a lot of these kind of resources, and there's all these, maybe the firewall pieces and all these things are kind of baked into your ordinary work life experience. But when you kind of are maybe not working anymore, or in your personal life in general, you probably don't have access to those same level of resources. So it kind of sounds like Achilleion's kind of solving that kind of gap. Was that true?
That's exactly right. And actually, I remember one of our customers phrased it that way. He was like, I just retired from a large company. I'm used to having an IT team. Yeah. And, this replaces that.
Nice. Okay. Well, I love that. And I think I'd be remiss to not ask this question, Amir, was, of course, anybody that comes on the show. And again, the title of our podcast is Retirement Success in Maine. You have any connections to Maine at all from
I have a few. I mean, I've been to Maine a few times while I lived in Massachusetts, drove up a few times. I had a friend that went to Bates College in Maine. I think I visited Acadia National Park once. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. There you go.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I do want to kind of rotate into this whole topic that we have today. And again, we're excited to have this conversation because I think we're going to learn a lot here today as well. Yeah. But this whole topic of how to keep ourselves safe online as we age, I really want to start with some foundation. So can you just give us a little bit of framework or a rundown on elder fraud and why seniors are frequent targets rather than other segments of the population? And then I'll ask a follow-up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, elder fraud is kind of this general category of other crimes that are targeted against elderly people. They can be, not all of them are crimes in the sense of money being stolen. Some of them are, things that are scams that, just waste people's time or, are intended to embarrass them or give them a hard time. But the main ones that we talk about or we see are stolen money or scams that trick someone else, socially engineer them to hand over money or account credentials or other things.
Gotcha. So can you talk about then, let's just maybe define the term here. I know we've thrown this out a couple of times. So can you just talk about what is cybersecurity? Because I think a definition might be helpful just to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of leading into that, nowadays, a lot of the elder fraud is done online or through digital means. So yeah, it's critical. So cybersecurity, often people when they think of cybersecurity, they think of software like their antivirus or their VPN. And typically that's not what we mean, like, professionals in the cybersecurity industry as cybersecurity. Those are what we call countermeasures. They do one specific thing, like close ports on your router. But cybersecurity is much more general than that. It is the detection, prevention, and then management of these, cyber attacks or cyber risks. So it's not just about preventing things. It's about identifying them. It's about stopping damage and actually addressing the issue and having plans to address the issue when it happens.
Nice.
I like that. I want to continue on just kind of building a kind of a foundation here for our conversation. Can you, and I know you just touched on it briefly, but what are some common elder fraud schemes that are out there today?
Yeah, so they fall into a bunch of different categories. One of them you touched on is phishing. Phishing is where you get an email. It could be pretending to be an organization that you normally work with. It could pretend to be a person that you know. It could be a text message. It could be a message on a social media platform. Basically, social engineering you to do something. And this is like not, something like, genius hackers are doing. This is as simple as I go to a public record site and I Google who your relatives are. And then I send you a message pretending to be your cousin and ask you to do something. That's it. Or one of your vendors or somebody that you know. It breaks down into other categories. There's instances where someone will pretend to be a grandchild or relative, that grandparent scams, they're often called. Another big category of scams that you see a lot or hear about is tech support scams. This is where there's a fake virus. So it's not really compromised your computer. It might be like a pop-up from a website that makes you think, to a person that's unsophisticated or doesn't have a lot of experience using technology, that their computer's been compromised. And it'll usually pop up with something like a phone number or something to call, and it'll be a call center overseas, and they will charge you money. And it's almost like fake extortion, because you don't actually have ransomware, but they convince you that you do, and that you need to pay some money to do that. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of other ones. There's scams that relate to like home repair or mortgages or financial scams. There's often phone scams that, you get a phone call and people will pretend to be from like the IRS or something and ask you to send money. A really nasty one that I've seen is where someone will call you, and let's say I know what bank you use and I have some information about you, like your username, but maybe not your password for your bank. I'll call you, tell you I'm calling from your bank, hit password reset. You'll get a code on your phone, and I'll be like, hey, Curtis, I just sent you a code to confirm. Are you, to make sure it's really you before we go any further. You tell me the code, and then now I'm in your bank account. So,
wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff like that. It's a really big category. That's the problem. If it was just one thing, and it's changing, next month it'll be something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Amir, I know from our end too, again, we use, as financial advisors, we use Fidelity to custody our clients' accounts, right? And so I think that's something why one of the reasons why we've chosen Fidelity is just because they have a really robust team, and they're really diligent at monitoring accounts for fraud. And as Curtis and I can attest, even kind of doing transactions on behalf of clients where we have rights is not even the easiest thing to do at times, which is a good thing, right?
That's right.
We remind ourselves it's a good thing as we're getting frustrated with how sometimes hard things can be to change or do. But I think from that end, we have seen some of our clients kind of fall into or forward a message of, hey, my granddaughter's skiing in the Swiss Alps and she broke her leg, and here's I need a wire amount of X number of dollars to this wired overseas bank account because she needs medical attention of $90,000 or something.
Wow.
Right. And it's amazing because it's somebody had hacked into their Microsoft Outlook. They had gone through previous emails. They knew the granddaughter's name, and they knew that it was true. She was overseas. She was backpacking Europe. So all these kind of things were pretty true, right? And you can kind of go, hey, if everybody across the line were not really on top of it, you could see how that could change. Again, from our policies and procedures, we always the good part is by having a relationship with our customers and our clients, we know them, but it's something where we always do verbal authorizations. We always kind of then have this strike up the conversation, making sure it's them and all that. But it's something where, we're seeing that happen more and more, and without even that person knowing it, that they've again assumed to be them and go to their trusted relationships they have out there with their financial institutions to kind of get access to their money. So I do want to ask you then, just with that kind of thought. So now you've kind of given us some of these schemes and some of the things that are happening. And again, there's going to be new schemes that are coming out every day. But what are some ways that our audience can protect themselves against those?
Yeah, that's important. And there's a lot of different things that have to happen that, I hate being the kind of like bad news kind of guy and, being negative, but honestly, the most important thing that has to happen if you want to protect yourself is to understand that you're responsible for your own security. By far, that is the most important thing. And it's a mental shift. When you survey people and ask them, who's responsible for your security, often they'll say things like their device maker or, their bank, because their bank is, federally obligated to reimburse them for fraud. And so, you expect these other groups to do this for you, but the truth is that you are actually responsible for your own security. And if you operate with that mindset, the type of things that you do differently are you don't sign up for everything that comes up online. You don't sign up for every newsletter or free offer or, that sort of thing, because what happens is, when you have like advanced like dark web monitoring, it's like constantly scanning for your information. You'll see that you get breaches from stuff that you didn't even know you had a relationship with. The organization you might be giving your information to may not be, bad people, may not have bad intentions, but that company uses 30 other vendors, and they might use a vendor for advertising, analytics and this and that. And some of these are scammy companies. Some of these companies don't have great security. Your information ends up on the dark web, from the most random places. So the first step is to just, not give out information. If you don't have to, don't sign up for things that you don't know, you're not confident about, and limit what you use. You don't need to download every app. If something is free, it's probably, you need to think twice about it. The number of times free antivirus has like turned out to be a scam, or like free VPNs have turned out to be scam, is like astounding. Like, every few months there's one in the news that was just stealing people's information. The kind of second thing that's really important is that, especially for elderly people, you have to talk to other people when you're not sure about something. And you'd be astounded at the number of people that have been victims of these scams or these cyber attacks. And there's a level of shame that goes along with it. And they don't share that with anyone. And we get to hear about it because, they kind of have this level of confidence to talk about it with us in privacy. But you'd be surprised. Most people have experienced something like this. They often don't tell their, friends and family, like, hey, somebody called me. I thought they were from the IRS, and I gave them $1,000 worth of Amazon gift cards, and then realized that wasn't the IRS after. Talking to people, ask your clients are lucky to have another layer of somebody to just talk to. Like, are you sure you want to wire this money? Often, people don't have that. But those are the two main ones. I mean, there's lots of tools to use. It's hard to kind of like create your own cybersecurity solution, because you do need to have like a bunch of different things, but you need to use a secure device. You have to make sure your device has a password. You need to make sure your devices are updated at all times using the most current version of the operating system. You should have an antivirus. Yes, even on a Mac, you need an antivirus. Those are probably the main ones. There's other things that are kind of like extra that I wouldn't say are, absolutely needed. Like, one that's really common is VPNs. People talk about VPNs all the time. Most people don't need a VPN. Most of the privacy you need is built into like the browsers and websites that you use. VPNs just hand your information to another party to have. So often it's more of a risk. Yeah.
Gotcha. So that was good. You discussed there kind of how to prevent or prepare. I want to kind of lay out a hypothetical here and say that I've kind of fallen victim to one of these schemes. So like, what's next? What do? I realized that I just gave someone $10,000 that wasn't the IRS or whatever it may be. Kind of what are the next steps there?
Yeah, so it's really case by case. So it depends on how it happened, what was stolen. Was it a online account, or was it money, or did you just wire the money? Did someone else wire the money on your behalf? So usually it starts with contacting your financial institutions first if money's been stolen. So immediately contact those places, make sure that, depending on how the fraud was perpetrated, the financial institution is responsible. There are many scenarios where the financial institution is not responsible. Those are often cases where it's, what we think of as not fraud, but just a scam. Someone's tricked you. It turns into really just like a he said, she said kind of situation.
Sure.
But if it's stolen money, immediately contact your bank. or your financial institution. The second thing you want to do is whatever method that was used to kind of do this. If it's a phone call, maybe there's nothing to do. But if it's an email or something through social media or a text message or those sorts of things, you want to change your passwords. You want to shut down those accounts, change the logins, add another layer of authentication. You want to go to your credit bureaus and make sure your credit is locked. If you don't have credit monitoring already, you want to make sure, and this is probably something you want to do before an attack happens, but if you haven't already, you want to go to, there's many services that do this. You can actually do it for free on your own. We do it for our clients. There are services that take your public information off public record sites. So there's all these sites that sell public records. That's kind of how these things keep perpetrating. One person gets attacked. We, take over some information about one person. Now I know everybody this person's lived with, their roommates, their relatives, every address they've had. You'd be surprised, just little pieces of information will just immediately give up trust. Like, hey, I was your neighbor on, fill in this street 10 years ago where you lived, something like that. And, a conversation starts. So, those are kind of the main things that have to happen.
Nice. Amir, thanks for that. Cause I think that's where, I think it's just kind of helpful to kind of understand like what's next in the kind of grand scheme of things. Is, as you said, there's a lot of shame, right? Is all of a sudden I get a hack, or I feel vulnerable. I feel violated. I don't know. I'm assuming it's all my fault, that I shouldn't have clicked on that thing, or I shouldn't have. And I'll tell a quick little story. When I was first getting into the financial services industry in the early 2000s, actually there's a gentleman who was a trust officer. So he's working with high-end investment trusts with a lot of money in them. He himself, he was like, I think 55 or 60 years old, fell into the Nigerian prince scheme. And it was like, we all laugh about it now, right? Is everyone, the Nigerian prince, and he needs help, and he's locked, and he needs money. And this guy sent him, I think, like $150,000 over a few years. But the whole, as you said, Amir, that shame, right? Is I should have known better. Like I'm this person, like, even though, I'm in this industry, I work with people's money every day. And he's saying, I fell into this scheme. So I think why I'm sharing that lesson is it really can happen to anybody, right? Is it doesn't have to be, I'm 94 years old and really don't know technology at all. I mean, it could be anybody, anytime, just from kind of the methods that you're saying that people are using. So I think that's just really important to highlight, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we have tons of young people who you would think are extremely tech savvy that have been compromised and done all those things too. And someone once asked me, like, why is there so much spam or these kind of emails? And the answer is because it works. Yeah. They do it because it works. One out of, several thousand people might reply.
Yeah, it's just a hit rate, right? And it's like, hey, and that hit rate is successful enough to keep the business going and to make enough money. And again, as you said, it's all a business of revenue and cost. And if it works, it works. I want to ask another question here, because I just kind of, if you kind of start being a little futurist here and you start thinking about more and more of our lives are becoming more and more integrated into the internet, right? Is we have smart refrigerators now, and, that can, order new things for you based on what's available, or you ran out of milk and all of a sudden it puts it on your list. Biometrics that are on our watches and our Fitbits. So we know our heart rates. We know my buddy just went for a run 20 minutes ago and he's telling me that, you need to get off your duff and go exercise. Social media with personal networks, location tracking. Curtis is laughing how we can kind of keep track of our, hey, where's my wife this very second? Like, it's all there. Right. But, how do you think we should be balancing, though, the benefits of implementing technology around our lives to that cost of loss of privacy? Because as you said, if there's ways that like this information is becoming more and more known and used and stored, it feels like we're we might be losing privacy. We might be exposing ourselves more to fraud or breaches, or as you said, your information is being used against you, possibly in the future in some nefarious way. So how do you think, like, because again, we're getting more and more integrated, more data is created. How do we balance that, you think, over time?
It's a really hard question. And actually on my podcast, I had the chief cloud officer of Deloitte, David Linthicum, and this was the topic that we discussed. And, his point, and I agree with him, is that it's a balancing act, because all these devices, there's all these what are called edge devices, they're, your bicycle or your refrigerator or your watch, right? They do these amazing things and they're enabled by this connectivity. And we don't want to stop that. I mean, it's not just enjoyable. There's also life-saving elements to it, detecting that you're about to get a heart attack from your, your smartwatch or something like that. But how do you balance it? It's a tough one. I think that there's some stigma around privacy that's probably, like, I would say, unnecessary, that this data, say, like, belongs to you, and like, Facebook or my watch has it. And part of that's not true. I mean, it's not really data. It's not really your data. It's, it's useful only to them because they have data collected around, like, how the device is used or something like that. But there are other things that are actually, your data, like your private information, your medical records associated with whatever it is. But the answer is that nobody really knows. What's happening is that there's more and more pressure being placed on large organizations. States are passing laws that have, like, consumer privacy laws. California, I think, is one of the big ones that has that. Europe has GDPR or So I mean, right now the focus has been, putting more pressure on large organizations, but it's a really hard problem. No one really has a clear answer, and I don't have a clear answer, honestly. There's not much we can do as individuals. I mean, you can think twice about using some of these devices if you're sensitive about your privacy.
Because I think that's been the response I've heard, is like, well, just kind of rebel against the use of technology then, and just have your clamshell flip phone. And, it's kind of this, like, stay off the grid. And it's like, it feels like, well, that's just not realistic, right? Because it's more than, you just become more and more detached from society is kind of that answer of that. So it's, I don't know. We hear this a lot, I think, from the population of, it's easy just to stay out of it. And then if I'm not on it, then I don't have exposure that way. But I think there's, as we've kind of found, and Curtis and I with our shows, we as humans have a need for connectivity, to connect to and make relationships and make friends and keep connected to those people. And technology, hopefully at the end of the day, it's there to ease that and make that better and make that more enriching. But again, it's tough, because I think what we just said is real, is nobody knows.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, imagine, the pandemic without all of it, without the connectivity. So
yeah,
it would have been terrible. It's totally terrible as it is, but talk about even worse, how now the only way you have is your, like, rotary phone or something. And that's pretty much it.
So I want to kind of rotate a little here and ask you, Amir, what advice would you give someone that would allow them to protect themselves as they age, right? So I think kind of the point here is, starting, say, someone in their 50s, they may still be, adept in technology, and they're, still working or recently retired. But certainly as we get to our 70s, our 80s, our 90s, some of that capacity or even will to stay up with technology is probably going to fade. So what is, again, some advice you have there as we age to kind of stay on top of our security?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, kind of what I was saying about, like, being responsible for your own security. I think when you get to a point where you can't be responsible for it yourself anymore, somebody else has to take over that responsibility for you. If you're going to be using devices, if you're going to have access to make decisions about, who to send money to or how to send money somewhere. Sure. So, there are ways to do that. That could be a trusted family member, could be, somebody that is taking care of you. You could hire a company to do it for you. That's kind of, somebody has to make sure that these emails or these transactions are happening. It's not much different, honestly, for a person that's very elderly to somebody that's a celebrity, which is another group of people that we work with. I mean, certain celebrities, you can just Google their name and get their home address. Yeah. So if I have your credit card number or some other thing, like, I know where you live, right? And so often things that those people will do is have their financial statements sent to an account, to an address that literally nobody knows, like not even the people around them. Like they'll use a PO box or something that's only for their financial statements. And no one around them will even know that address, except like a select few. So there's a lot of things that have to be done for those people that are similar for probably elderly people, but again, it's hard because, you have to trust that person. Sure. That person has to kind of be a fiduciary, really, because, you can get taken advantage of by, friends and family and all that as well.
For sure. Yeah. No, that's a great answer there. I want to kind of keep digging here. So I want to talk about social media. So we had a recent podcast episode where we just kind of discussed some statistics of retirees, and it's becoming more and more popular that retirees are using things like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever it may be. So I want to ask you, what should a retiree know when they're setting up a social media profile for the first time? And then also as they manage that, kind of back to my previous question, as they get older, kind of what are some things they should know and should do there to protect themselves?
Yeah, so I would say that the first thing is that, and this is probably same advice for the first point I would give anybody, is that you need to set up a safe password to log in. You need to create the account using another, usually you're required to have an email address, using another account that's secure, that has a safe password, and kind of, goes all the way down, because somebody steals your email address, they steal all the things associated to it. So, make sure you set it up properly, set up two-factor authentication if you can. Most of these, and that's something that's changing. Like that's definitely in the next few years, like two-factor authentication, which is, to explain to people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, please.
It's where you have a second thing, like another app or a text message that, ideally not a text message, but something else that confirms that you're logging in. So you enter your password, you get an email that says, here's a second code. And I think everything is going to shift to that. I think everything will default to having two-factor authentication, and it's already starting to happen. So setting up the account in a secure way. The second thing is that, when you're on social media, you have to be careful. It's no different than talking to strangers. But in this case, these strangers are hidden by randomness and can easily disguise themselves and be completely different people than they say they are. They can be, Curtis, you might know me, and then somebody's friends with me on the social media account. That doesn't mean that I actually know that person. And if that person is messaging you saying like, hey, we're both friends with Amir, we both know Amir, like I'm a trusted person now. You can't trust that person. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. They can have accounts that are completely made up, fake name, fake picture. They can make an account easily as somebody that's related to you or someone that they know, and message you. So it's very sad and it's very gloomy, advice. It is. But you have to be really careful. You have to, kind of know what you're doing. You have to, proceed with caution. If you can't, and this again happens to people of all ages, I have tons of friends that have met random, people who they thought were a nice girl that they, had long conversations with. And it's like, oh, I've been talking to this girl for 2 weeks. And it's like, well, have you picked up the phone and talked to her? Like, have you had a video chat? And it's like, no, we haven't done that yet. Yeah. That's kind of weird. Maybe like do that immediately for you, so it's the same thing. I mean, if you can't get the person on the phone, if you can't see them, it's more than a red flag. That's enough. You don't have to wait till they've robbed you to determine that it's a scam.
Well, and Amir, that's actually going to be my next question, and I want to maybe get you to expand on that a little bit more, because I know with again the population that we worked with, especially as we age, typically, with especially with married couples, we had an episode talking about gray divorce. That gray divorce is becoming more and more prevalent of people that are divorcing as they retire, or vice versa. Is again couples that are staying together and one passes away, and their life partner's gone and they're lonely, right? That's something where I think as we age, we just seek more and more of those relationships, and as we lose relationships, we try to fill that. And as kind of Curtis alluded to too, where more and more people getting to be online, then dating becomes the next thing online, right? And I know obviously there's like the show on MTV, like Catfish and things like that, where they kind of follow these scams and how it could be anybody that's really kind of displaying romantic interest in you, and you think that it's real. And they, again, to your point, meeting with them and trying to make sure that they are in fact the person they say they are in real life whenever they can. But I could see where somebody that's even more vulnerable, right, is, hey, I don't know technology. I'm really lonely, right? I'm just vulnerable all over the place right now because of seeking that connection. So can you just talk a little bit about maybe how someone can detect that authenticity of somebody that's online? Because as you said, it's randomness, it's strangers. And then if I am getting into kind of that dating pool, how do I be safe?
Yeah. So, I mean, the advice I'm going to give on this, some people are not going to like, but what I think has to happen is that if you start a conversation with a person, I think that at minimum you need to get and you decide that you may have some interest in pursuing any sort of relationship with them, even a friendship. What you want to do is get to a point where you're on video chat as soon as possible. So you've traded a bunch of messages, not 2 weeks, but maybe like a few days have gone by. You want to get on video chat to make sure this person is who they really are. It's not about to see what they look like necessarily, like, do they match their pictures exactly? But you want to know, is this person the same person they're talking about? Are they really, the age that they say they are? Are they really in the place they say they are? You can tell if the person they're not, here in the US, if the time zone is different or those sorts of things. So getting to video chat as soon as possible is a good idea. I mean, there's other things that you can do that, I would probably not want to communicate with people that are not like nearby. Like, I wouldn't want to talk to somebody knowing that they're halfway across the world and strike up that conversation. And maybe people have different feelings about that, but there's often a lot more risk that goes along with doing that.
Interesting. Because again, I could also see where, and I know some technology is starting to be developed, and you see this with shows right now, is this kind of concept of a deep fake, right? And kind of this idea of someone can mimic audio of somebody else so they can mimic video. I can see where that also, even maybe video chatting in a few years maybe doesn't become as authentic as meeting in real life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, what happens now, is that the people that are doing this send videos. They won't get on video chat with you. They make a video answering a question or saying something or send a photo that can be easily like doctored and send that as like, hey, I can't video chat with you. I can't get on the phone with you, but here's a video I made that answers the question. So again, extremely suspicious.
Right.
You don't have to wait till you've been robbed to know that it's a scam.
Yeah.
So I want to rotate here a little bit and get into kind of digital wallets and cybersecurity in that sense. So we did a great podcast episode a few episodes back with an individual named Tyler Frederick, and he works at the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. in their fintech department. So really my question for you, Amir, is just how can someone protect digital assets, right? Think of cryptocurrencies, for example, that essentially the only wall of protection there is a password. I mean, I know that's kind of a 10,000 foot view, but it's essentially relying on a password. So can you just kind of dive in there and discuss kind of ways that we could protect things like digital wallets, digital currency, and that?
Yeah. So kind of there's two buckets that this falls under. One is where somebody else is holding the currency. So if you're using like a broker to do that, like a Coinbase, or whatever, and that is the same as protecting any other online account that you have. So secure password, 2 factors of authentication, connected to another account that is also secured, and that's kind of the main thing. Don't share the password. Change your password if that password's been breached. It needs to be unique, so that if somebody steals your Twitter account, they don't have your bank password, that sort of thing. So that one is pretty straightforward. If you're holding the currency yourself, that's also pretty straightforward also. So the way to think about it that way is that it's like protecting any other file on your computer. It's just another file. So making sure that your computer is secure, making sure there's proper antivirus, it's updated, there's a password to log in. You're not doing things or downloading software that put your computer at risk. If you have a large amount of or very concerned about your digital currency that you're holding yourself, what you want to do is separate that from the rest of what you're doing. So it's often called like air gapping. So you'll put it on a computer that you don't use for anything else, and that you're not doing your web browsing and your social media stuff on that computer, and it's separate. It's separated. That's kind of like the best tips for that.
Yeah. No.
And also is also don't lose the password, right? Because I think you hear kind of these stories as well, as someone made a very unique password and then they lost it for whatever reason. They didn't kind of have good record retention of what their passwords were, and then all of a sudden their $1 million of whatever cryptocurrency coin they have is not accessible because they don't have a password anymore, right?
That's right. And I'll just add that cryptocurrency is not covered, from my knowledge, under most insurance policies that I work with a lot of insurance policies. So it's excluded. And actually the reason that other funds aren't is because the bank has a responsibility to protect them also. So It's not the case with crypto.
Yeah, gotcha. That's a good point. So we have one final question for you, Amir. Kind of not really cybersecurity related. It might be. We'll see where you go with it. So as we've mentioned a couple times here, so you are joining us today on the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. One question that we love to ask all of our guests is, what is your personal definition of retirement success?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. So, this is good. It's forcing me to think. I would say that probably, I would love to be in a financial position to be able to help startups and technology companies, and kind of, I've gotten a lot of help from people who are a lot older than me who've done this before and, had great success. And I'd love to be able to do that and invest in startups and help them,
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's really good. Cause again, I think sometimes it's good to go, hey, I know what my purpose in life is, and kind of, I know what makes me feel good, but also to throughput that into retirement. That's a really awesome answer. So Amir, I really want to thank you for your time today. I can say, just even personally, half Curtis and I, we've learned a lot on our conversation, but I know our audience will get a lot out of this today too. So I appreciate you coming on, lending a lot of your expertise to the show, and can't thank enough, because I could see where even in a couple of years where this could totally be a nude show and kind of something else. So we might reach back out to you if you're open to it.
That sounds great. Thank you both so much. It was my pleasure.
All right, Amir, you be well. Take care.
Thanks. Take care.
Okay, so I want to say bucket list for us for this podcast, check cybersecurity expert, because I know we've searched a lot to find someone that we thought would really be able to connect well on the topic, but not get into the whole like let's get super techie and code and all kind of this super technical stuff that I think people might get bored with or lost in or all that. So I thought Amir did a really great job striking that right tone today. So I thought that was a really kind of cool way to connect with somebody. Obviously, he graduated from Harvard and studied advanced computer security at Stanford, right? So he's done his thing, right? So he's doing it. He's got it. So all that was really good. And I think from our end, again, we want to, of course, wrap up each show just highlighting some things that we learned or things that maybe to add on to our conversation with Amir today. And maybe I'll just kind of start real quick there. I think one of the things that Amir said that I kind of I thought was very valuable to hear from his side is when he's dealing with people, especially people that are aging and on remediations, right? Is that many times that even with that population, even more, is that they really feel shame. They feel like it's their fault that they clicked on the pop-up browser, they fell for the text message, they fell for the phone call. And they thought it was the IRS and it really wasn't. And then they did buy, $1,000 of gift cards, or they signed up for something they didn't really know, or they gave away sensitive information. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done. I know better than this. What am I thinking? I'm so stupid. In what he was saying happens is that they siloed their story.
Yep.
Is that I'm so ashamed that I don't then tell people. Not only do I not tell people like, hey, I need help, by the way, I'm in trouble, but we also don't tell our peers because we're so ashamed, which would also be helpful. It's like, hey, by the way, they're targeting our whole neighborhood and everybody in our neighborhood's getting targeted with this scheme because we're all very similar with profiles.
Sure.
And we won't tell each other because we're ashamed that we're all falling for it. So it would be helpful, I think, if we're maybe a little more open with that of like, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what I learned. This is how I could have prevented that in the future. This is how I help solve it. I think all of those are really valuable things. And again, I know from our podcast, we've even talked about, hey, some people that are first person stories, these things are just really tough for people to open up about of, hey, from a first person perspective, I fell victim to this and this is what happened and this is how it affected me. And so again, I think that's why Amir did a fantastic job of talking about his experiences with these sorts of situations. I could see where all of us, and I relayed that story about a gentleman I knew that fell victim to that Nigerian prince. And again, he worked with money every day, right? And that's something where just knowing that it can happen to any one of us, and if it does happen to you, I think going to your financial institutions first and saying, hey guys, this happened. Let's work together. Where should we do something? So I guess that's for me. The point I wanted to raise or the thought that I wanted to share today, because I thought that was really fantastic to hear it from him. So Curtis, what did you take away from today's show?
Yeah. I think an important piece that came up was when we were discussing kind of how, I think the question to Amir was how we can kind of protect ourselves as we age with technology, going from 50 to 60 to 70 to 80. And it kind of segued into the takeaway that I want to bring up. And it's just how important it is to kind of have a plan there. And he touched on it, you really almost need a fiduciary who you have to essentially entrust in your cybersecurity, because, if you get to that, he talked about how we are responsible for our own security ultimately. And if we get to a point where we feel like we can't be responsible, you have to kind of enlist some help there. And how important it is, not only that step of finding someone who you trust, and whether it's a family member or neighbor, whoever it is, you really got to make sure that that person is trustworthy, because you're essentially handing over the keys there. But then kind of furthermore with that, and you and I just chatted about this, Ben, and it's almost like a part of estate planning now, and in the way technology is becoming such a big part of our lives. And I think it's only going to become a bigger part. So as we age and as we plan, build these estate plans, I think technology and cybersecurity needs to be a part of that, because, if you do when you pass and you're left with all these accounts, or say it's digital currencies, for example, that's not going to be at your bank. Like you got to have, and not even to get in that deep, but just, like social media, for example, that Facebook account could live on forever if someone could get into it after you've passed. So again, it's just interesting to see, kind of, not to get cheesy in how the world's changing, but technology is becoming such a huge part that I think it needs to play a role in estate planning.
Yeah. And I think being thoughtful about it, right, is to say, hey, here's the plan of handing over some of the keys to some of the things that makes my life work, whether it be my physical assets, like my car, my house, like, hey, somebody needs to take care of these things that mean something to me. But from a financial lens is kind of do this on the financial, and here's what's working and how this all works together, and who I work with, and all of that's important. But as you're saying, is kind of that next lens is digital. And I could see where, I've heard stories of somebody's passed away, and nobody from Facebook knows that, or whatever the social media platform.
Sure.
And somebody hacks that 3, 4, 5 years later. And now, I've passed, but somebody's now pretending to be Ben Smith, and all the reputation that may be good or bad I've built in my life. And the people that are, they can interact as me and pretend to be me and use that to an advantage, which maybe helps them. But again, if I'm past, maybe I'm saying I don't care, but maybe I do care here, is that I don't want someone to pretend to be me. And then 10 years later, they go, oh, that Ben Smith guy, he's such a terrible person. And look what all the stuff he did while he was online to whatever party. And I think those are the things that are a little bit scarier there. And that's why, as you're saying, kind of making sure that username and passwords are really something that do get handed to the power of attorney, or again, somebody that you trust to make sure that those things are cleaned up, possibly when we're done using them. Doesn't mean that we have to be passed to be done using, or we're gone. So I think that's a really important point. So I do want to mention to you too, again, we had Amir on, and he did mention that Achilleion does do kind of comprehensive managed security for individuals. And again, he does the tools on all devices, antivirus, VPN. They do the monitoring like ADT, and then they have the insurance component there too. So we'll have a link if that is interesting to you and you want to check it out. We'll have a link to again, Amir is the CEO of that organization. We'll have the link to that website. You can go check them out and see if that's a fit for you. I believe they do have a 30-day free trial if you want to try that out and see if that's. But I could see where, again, we've had clients that said, "Look, hey, when I was at this organization, everybody did this IT stuff for me, right? I just showed up and my computer worked and it had all the latest antivirus and all the securities on it. I don't have to do a thing." But then when you go home, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not an IT professional with cybersecurity, advanced computer security master degree at Stanford. That's not me. So having some value from hiring a group that does it might be pretty helpful here. So
for sure.
Again, check them out there. It was great to have Amir on. Again, you can go to blog.guidancepointllc.com/50. Again, episode 50 here to get the show notes. And again, we'll have a link to Achilleion there to check out. But we really value you tuning in. Again, it's been a nice little run we're still having at episode 50. Our release timing has been a little bit delayed. Appreciate you staying with us there. Curtis and I are taking on a little bit more as our colleague Abby is out on maternity leave. So appreciate you being patient with us, but we really value the opportunity to do this for you and with you. And we can't wait to do it with you again. So catch you next time.